Hi guys. Oh my gosh, you ladies are so pretty. Hi. Come on out, handsome rooster. Mr. Quiggles, come on. No, you're just gonna stare at me. All right. Today's question comes from Amy. Hi Amy. And she says, we are soon to be first-time chicken owners and I was wondering about the best ground cover for a chicken run. Unfortunately, our yard tends to be a wet one, so I'm not sure what the best option would be. All right, so when it comes to chicken bedding, there really is no one best size fits all option. It really does come down to your particular circumstances, which type of bedding is gonna be best for you. And you're gonna see with this video that I used to use sand in my run, and that really was the best option for my setup at the time. But with this new run I have here, and probably with all of my future runs, I will never use sand bedding again. In my run, that is. I will most likely always use sand in my coop, but that's a different story. And you'll see why sand is no longer the right run bedding for me as I walk you through the 4 things you need to consider to choose the right bedding for your particular circumstances. And those 4 things are, number 1, safety. Not all bedding types are safe for your chickens. Number 2, location, which is just looking at how well your run site drains. So Amy, with your wet run area, this will be important for you. Number 3, design, how enclosed or exposed your run material will be. And number 4, usage. How much time your chickens are spending in that run. Are they in there 24/7? Are they free ranging most of the day? That's gonna make a difference in what you choose. So let's talk about safe beddings first. I tend to think of beddings as belonging to 2 different groups, organic and inorganic. Organic beddings include everything from peat moss to straw to wood shavings to wood chips, just anything that comes from plants. Inorganic bedding, on the other hand, is clay, sand, gravel, rocks. And as far as confined runs go, something like this, there's really only a handful of beddings I recommend. So for organic beddings, I recommend straw, hemp, aspen shavings, or dried leaves. There are other types that could work, particularly if you're in a very different climate from me. For example, if you're in a tropical climate, you might have bedding types there that I will never even have access to. So these 4 types aren't the only types of organic beddings that could work for you, but they are the organic beddings that I both have used and am still comfortable recommending. As for inorganic beddings, the only one I really recommend is coarse grain sand. So in this run right now, I'm using organic bedding. I've mixed together chopped straw and aspen shavings. The straw is softer and more comfortable for the chickens, but the aspen shavings take a lot longer to break down, so I kind of like the combo of both. But really, any of the organic beddings in this list will do. As for other popular organic beddings, I don't like cedar shavings. I don't like pine shavings. These beddings have toxic properties. Long-term exposure to them isn't good for chickens. They're also just irritating to the nasal cavity. So those are my recommendations for safe ground covers you can use. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm gonna help you decide if you wanna use one of the safer organic beddings like straw, hemp, or aspen shavings, or if you wanna use sand, because the organic bedding materials, they all behave really similarly, but sand is really, really different. So the next thing you need to consider is location. You absolutely want to build your run in a place that drains well, so if you have a place on your property that's higher up, that might be ideal. You want a place where the water can just flow down away from it. You don't want to build your run in a place where water pools like it does over here. This spot gets really wet. You might not be able to tell that much right now because we are getting into the dry season, but water just pools there. But what do you do if you've already built your run in an area that doesn't drain well, or the place you want to build your run, you really just want to build it there, isn't a place that drains well, or God forbid your entire property doesn't drain well? What then? Well, I actually did have that problem with my run over here. So I chose a spot for my coop and run because it was just convenient, but the spot does get wet and muddy, so there's two things that I did in order to address that. One, I dug a little trench here to channel water away from the spot, so when it comes down this slope, it flows that direction instead of down into my run. And the second thing I did is I put gravel and sand on top of the bare dirt as a kind of floor to my run. It raised the run area up a bit from its surroundings and made it so water would drain through the sand and gravel rather than pool in my run. But note that the gravel and sand isn't the bedding I'm using in the run. You saw earlier I'm using organic bedding. The gravel and sand are just a base that I put the organic bedding on top of. But if for whatever reason you're worried that even if you do put gravel and sand down, you're still just gonna have too much water in your area, then I recommend you put a really thick layer of gravel down anyway, and then you use a really thick layer of sand for your bedding. Because if your area is constantly wet and you use organic bedding, that bedding is just gonna get muddy and poopy and soaked. And especially if you live in a climate that's warm, you may end up with a breeding ground for mold and bacteria and all sorts of nasty disease-causing organisms. Sand, on the other hand, it just doesn't hold on to water the way that organic bedding does. It drains better, it dries better. And simply because sand is inorganic, it's just not going to support molds and other bad organisms the way organic bedding does, because there's just not much available to feed them in sand. On to number 3, design. Just how well protected is your run from the elements? You can see that my run here is ultra protected. The entire run is covered by a roof. The walls are covered with plastic, which I'll actually be removing soon since we're getting into the warm, dry season. But this run, as it is now, stays really dry, no matter how much rain or snow we get. The only place that water really gets in is here, where we have all this ventilation. And so this very far into the coop does get wet, but the majority of the coop is bone dry. And that means I can use organic bedding in here and it stays dry for the chickens no matter what the weather is outside. But if you look at one of my old runs here at my previous house, you can see it wasn't as well protected. Only half of the run was covered, and we just used carports to cover it, so we'd still get rain and snow coming in at the edges. Only the center of the run was dry. And that's one of the reasons sand was a good bedding choice to use in that run, because the space just wasn't well protected from the snow and it was getting wet in there. My best advice for anyone building a run is to build it in a way that protects the run from rain and snow, like this one. Your chickens will just have a much better quality of life if you can do that for them. Whereas this older run I showed you was the first run we ever built, and we thought that it was going to be a good run when we built it. We really did do our best as beginners, but it really was just too exposed. I know, Match Pie, you got a lot to say. I know. But if that is where you're at now with your run, then sand is probably your best choice for bedding. Hi, Quiggles. Oh, hello. Hi, Stella. And on to number 4, the fourth thing you need to consider is usage. How much time are your chickens spending in your run? If your chickens are free range for the most part and they're spending most of their time outside and they hardly ever come into the run, maybe they only come into the run to get out of the rain or something like that, then I highly recommend you use sand in your run. Sand stays a lot cleaner. The poop dries in it pretty much immediately. Best practice is to scoop poop out of your run, but you don't really have to if your chickens aren't spending much time in there. Here's a confession. I used to free range my chickens. I free ranged them for years, and I never once cleaned my run. The little poop that was in there just dried up and broke down, and poop buildup was just never a problem. It almost was like it just kind of disappeared. I would add new sand to the run every few years, but other than that, it was maintenance free. Girl! It's alright, guys. It's alright, guys. But as for my chickens here, I won't be free ranging them. We just have way too many predators where we're living right now. We are about to start working on building them a very large uncovered yard. You can actually see the outline of where the fence is going to go because we've trenched it. And I'll be planting a small jungle for them in this larger yard over the next few years, which they will love a lot more than this run. So I suspect in future years, they won't be spending much time in this run. And if they were able to use their large natural yard year round, then I would use sand bedding in this run just to make my life easy. But the problem is we get winter here. And we get snow. So that means my chickens will be spending the majority of their time in this protected run for the winter months, and that's why I'm using organic bedding. So the reason I want organic bedding in here is because after everything I've experienced and after everything I've read, I truly believe that if my chickens had a choice, they would choose organic bedding over sand for a number of reasons. First, sand is just less comfortable to bed on than organic bedding is. Now, I love sand in the coop. Topic for another video, but in the coop, the sand acts more as a litter than it does bedding. The chickens tend to roost in the coop. They don't spend much time on the floor at all. But chickens do spend a lot of time on the floor of their run when they're locked in or the weather is bad. And when I kept sand in my run in the winter, that sand got really cold. It was miserable for them. The organic bedding, on the other hand, is just a lot more comfortable and a lot warmer for them. Second, the sand just gets kind of hard in the winter. It just gets really compacted, and I think that that lower layer of the sand that's against the ground even freezes a little bit. And I know some people will counteract that by using a broad fork when that happens, or even a rototiller to break up that harder sand, but it's just not really something I want to deal with. And in this run in particular, the entire floor under the bedding here and under the layers of the gravel and the sand base, the entire floor is lined with hardware cloth that's attached to the frame. That's actually how we're keeping burrowing predators out, and I don't think rototilling into that would be smart. Lastly, reason number 3, and this one's really important for chicken happiness, and this is actually why, as long as my chickens are somewhat confined to an enclosed run, like mine are going to be every single winter, as long as that's the case, I will never use sand in my run again. Never. Organic bedding is safer to forage in than sand bedding is, or at least we have good reason to believe that. Because from everything we do know about bedding types and their hazards, sand is not a bedding that you want your chickens to be kicking around in all day. Because when chickens forage, they're kicking their bedding everywhere, and if they're using sand, that means they'll be creating a whole lot of dust. The problem with that is some of the minerals in that dust can cause serious lung damage over time. You don't want to be inhaling that yourself, and you certainly don't want your chickens to be inhaling that because their respiratory systems are even more susceptible to damage than ours are. And you might be saying, okay, but how much foraging do chickens actually do in an enclosed run anyway? And the answer to that is, if you provide them with things to forage for in their bedding material, they will choose to forage for about half of their waking hours. This is one of those long-lost secrets of chicken behavior. It's called contra freeloading. It is the thing that keeps my chickens happy and busy all winter long with almost no effort on my part. And that's the main reason I'll never use sand in the run again. I do believe organic bedding is overall easier, safer, and more enjoyable for chickens to forage in. And if you want to learn more about how to get your chickens happily foraging in your bedding all day long, check out this video here. I hope that clears up your questions about bedding in the run. And as always, happy chickening. What you doing, girl? Huh? What you doing?